Hello, I am Charles Dimov, the Vice President of Marketing at Contract Pod AI, and we are talking today with Jerry Levine at IPsoft. Jerry, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on today, Charles. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. As you mentioned, I am with IPsoft. I'm the General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of the company. You may know us better by our other brand, Amelia, our conversational AI product. We are a global AI and autonomics company that's been around for about 20 years. We service businesses across the globe from Australia, Japan, South America, South Africa, all Europe, the US, all over the world. Companies from banks and insurance companies to technology companies and others use our products to make life easier and make it so that people can do more and engage more with their clients and their technology systems. Some of our products are aimed at, like I said, conversational AI. We do have products that focus on IT help desk, all of that. And ultimately, the goal is, we want to change the world through cognitive computing, and we think we're well on the path to doing that.
Wow, so that's pretty exciting stuff, actually, on the forefront of AI technology. Nice, excellent. So you're in charge of a number of different folks on the legal side, and what are some of the key responsibilities that you and your team kind of convey at IPsoft?
Sure. Legal teams today take on more and more work because we're not expected to just be lawyers anymore. We're expected to be business partners. We're expected to know how to do strategy beyond just legal strategy. And of course, this depends on the size of a legal department. We are able to do quite a bit with a small department that has really been aided through technology, whether it's our own internal technology or products like Contract Pod AI and other legal technology that we use. My team does everything from compliance to risk management, to contract negotiations, litigation. We're running it. I like to point out that we're basically an 80-20 shop. 80% of the work should be staying in-house with us. And the 20% that requires very specialized knowledge, requires a big team of perhaps it's a M&A deal or litigation support or discovery, that's what should go out. That's what a team like ours relies on outside counsel for. But our goal is to do what we can in-house with our tools and then to develop new solutions, both legal and business-wise, to keep the company running, keep our business partners throughout the company happy, and ensure that, every day the company is successful and we're doing what we can to make that happen.
Okay, so to do everything that a standard legal team does. I mean, reduce risk for the company and make sure that you're there to help with the contracts and with whatever issues arise, I guess.
Absolutely. One thing that I try to instill in my team is that you really have to be a partner, and it's up to us we have to guide sales teams and other teams who don't have the knowledge we have, who don't have, as a lawyer, you're trained to think like a lawyer. You're trained to solve problems in a certain way. It's important to recognize not everyone has that training, which is fine. We all have different skills. We all bring different things to the table. But also, it should be our job to come up with solutions, present them, and help folks understand what the best solution is. A key part of that, I think, is, and I've written about this before, I think you and I have talked about this before, Charles, that strategy, you're not expected anymore to be a legal leader at any stage. You're not expected to just be a lawyer anymore. You have to start thinking about business strategy. You have to start thinking about driving positive outcomes. And of course, keeping in mind that you do have to minimize risk and evaluating what levels of risk are important, what levels of risk can you say, you know what, I can live with this. The company will, if this risk happens, we will survive and will survive well. Versus if this risk happens, the company's done for. So that's what we aim to do, and we aim to do it in a way that's a partner style rather than one thing that I think is important is in-house, you're getting paid to deliver a solution.
Yes.
Your job is that solution, not to say, no, we can't do that, but to say, look, that, one of my favorite things to say is, that is an option. It's a terrible option, but it is absolutely an option. However, I have other solutions here that are much better, achieve that result, and in many cases, this is what businesses love to hear, for us, it'll be cheaper, it'll be less expensive, it'll be faster.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what we have to do, is identify where we can make those savings and drive that to successful completion while managing risk, while advising the company, and ultimately doing it within a way that everybody walks away saying, hey, we did a great job, team. Let's do this right.
I love your approach on that. Yes, that's an option, but it's a terrible option. Yes. Anyway, that's good. That's a nice way of saying no. Don't do that politely. And of course, the main part that you're kind of saying is, it sounds like you're basically saying that your legal team covers the core of what legal teams have to cover, again, that risk mitigation and such, and guidance and stuff. But at the same time, actually on that guidance side, also doing a little bit more of the strategic work and being that business partner, which is so important, I think, frankly, to every legal team. Every legal team should be aspiring to that, if they're not there, at least to be able to kind of step towards that. And that's kind of interesting, because in a couple of, I forget, was it a couple of months ago, actually, you wrote a great post for us, in which case you were kind of talking about you were actually ahead of the curve when the whole COVID crisis started, in terms of adapting to the digital age. So a lot of legal teams aren't necessarily there, right? They're still, they've got, let's call it, a little bit more antiquated methods, and they haven't kind of taken on the digital age from the perspective of having, let me pick on something I know, the contracts all digitized, for example, in a common repository, something that people can kind of get to from anywhere. And yet you guys had actually started that early, so when COVID came, it wasn't really that big an issue for you. So what were some of the big initiatives? Okay, contract management was one of them, for sure, taking on a CLM. But what were some of the other big initiatives also that you took on in terms of your kind of technological progress on the legal side?
So I'm not ashamed to admit this. I am a huge geek about legal technology.
That's great.
And technology in general, I'm an early adopter. I have had a very interesting career because of that. One thing that really drove this home coming out of law school years ago was how difficult lawyers find using technology in general. And there is a shift, now I would say one thing that I've noticed in my hires now and the people I work with is that they're much more comfortable, although there's still some reticence and, to really move forward with technology in a lot of ways. For in-house departments, I think it became even more important. You can look at some of the changes that happened after the 9/11, after the World Trade Center. You saw a big change to start getting off-site. First, the law firms that were in the Twin Towers. You saw and I'm not trying to be depressing here, but this is important to think about. If you lost everything and you could move off-site, you wanted to move off-site. You had multiple backups, multiple fail-safes. Ultimately, what happens in-house is you're moving a lot of progress. You're moving a lot from, we maintain an Excel file of contracts. We have everything in folders. To guys, ladies, whomever, everybody. We should be able to work wherever we are. And so, about 10 years ago, I left I joined an e-discovery practice as their deputy GC.
Mm-hmm.
I then started my own firm focused on tech companies, startups. And the key thing that I noticed was everybody wanted to be able to do their work wherever they could. People, even before COVID-19, people wanted to work remotely. People wanted to be able to say, you know what, I got my laptop, I got my phone, I'm going to go to the beach, I can work under an umbrella.
Yes.
So one key thing that I think we've really looked at is how do we enable people to work wherever they are, give them those tools, and keep them happy.
Mm-hmm.
So, ultimately that meant, moving to single sign-on applications where you don't need to go through the steps of jumping onto a VPN,
mm-hmm.
making sure everything goes through a secure tunnel, because you can use available technology to access things through SSL and TLS encryption technologies. You can be able to access all your company's documentation, your company's information without being on site, sitting in a room. Now, of course, I'm saying that as I've started returning to the office, and
mm-hmm.
I want to be here. I have set up at home the exact same setup I have here at my office: multiple monitors, multiple screens. So the key thing that we brought in everything that will enable us to work remotely wherever we are, whether that's on a mobile device, on an iPad, on a tablet of another brand, or on sitting here on a laptop, or even on a desktop, for those people who still use desktops.
Yep.
So a core tenet of this has been, how can we make it easy to access? So, ContractPod AI, we've set up for single sign-on. We've moved to other technologies that allow us to access our other file storage, our legal encrypted file storage remotely. We have set up sharing systems for outside counsel, for transmission of secure documents via an encrypted platform. Even our messaging has moved from being locked in to an older chat function that you need to be on the local network or VPN to moving to platforms that allow you to use it wherever you are on any device. We've moved to systems that let us work collaboratively on documents, while they sit in a I hate to say, in the new SharePoint based on Microsoft Office 365, we can work collaboratively on a document or work together, and we can do it anywhere we are. So you're sitting in Ontario. I think you actually share the same building as our Canada office. And ultimately, what this has shown is none of us. Human contact is nice, but we can work anywhere. And my team, and I think other teams, have really realized that you can do this. You can be a good attorney, deliver great results, and not have to be tied down. Now, there's real value to face-to-face contact, whether even more so than virtual video contact. There is that value, but being able to do what we need to do and access the technology in an easy way, and be able to share it and not have to worry about how we're accessing it, and not have to worry about all the additional steps you used to have to go through, or even the dreaded printing of something, having to FedEx it. I'm still surprised now when I get something via mail or FedEx, because I'm like, why didn't you email? And there are things you have to still send in hard copy, but almost all of this can be done digitally without using paper, whether it's through going from ContractPod AI into a digital signature solution, into we're even working on like web-based negotiation platforms. We're looking at now, how do we invite people in to, I'm not sure how it'll work yet, but how do we get that last, if you think of it in the sense of the last mile, how do we get through those last few items in a collaborative environment on both sides and make sure that we can ultimately do a deal, get everything signed, and make it work right. So a lot of this has been, a lot of other technologies we've run in have been focused on, even over the past 5 years, have been focused on getting that remote capability available, making it easy to work on, and making sure that people can access and understand it, which is ultimately the key thing. And, you know, a lot, and this goes back to being a good partner, I think, and I'm kind of jumping around. A lot of this relies on explaining what you're doing to people who aren't lawyers, to people who don't have this daily interaction with software or the law, legal software, legal technology, or the law in general, and making sure they understand why we do it this way, why there's a process, and what things mean. So that's been a core. That's been, I think, for a lot of what we've noticed, it's come down to how do we explain what we're doing, how do we explain the technology, and how do we make people comfortable with it, whether they're super tech savvy or they're, you know, someone who used to print everything out and read it in hard copy before recycling it.
Having done this a couple of times, because I mean, you've certainly been championing the CLM, the contract lifecycle management system, bringing that in. You've actually brought in a couple of other things which have been sort of the digitization of legal as well into IPsoft. Now, having done this a couple of times, I mean, so in other words, you really have been on that forefront of that the digital transformation of your legal team, which is amazing. That's great. That takes a lot of leadership to do. Any tips? I mean, so what are some of the commonalities, for example, that you've seen? Any major learnings that you would say that, hey, having gone on this journey a couple of times, this is what I saw, and you know what? Maybe this is one of the considerations you might have if you're kind of just at the early phase of it.
Sure. I actually speak to other GCs about this, and the number one thing that I keep telling them over and over is, as the GC, you are the face of the legal department, not your counsel, not your paralegal, not your contract managers, not your AGC. You are the face. What that means is you have to step outside your comfort zone if you're not comfortable with technology. You have to be involved in the digital transformation. You know, I love that, because law is always a laggard in terms of adopting new technology. So for so many lawyers to be interested now in digital transformation really fills me with a lot of joy. And, you know, obviously I have 2 points of this, because one, I love legal technology, and two, you know, I want to begin building products with our team here that really help lawyers handle their tasks easier. Yeah, and just don't worry, Charles. We're not getting into CLM anytime soon.
Okay. That's good.
But honestly, you know, for the GCs out there, I would 100% say that the number one thing that any GC can do is to be involved in the process, understand what your team is asking for, and understand why you need it. And I'll be honest, if you're a GC but you only see 10 contracts a year, let's say that, you know, you're really not seeing a lot of contracts because everything is very simple, you can focus on other forms of you can focus, and, you know, I would love to see you pick ContractPod.ai because I'm fond of it. I think it's a great system. But as a GC, you know, you have to focus on where you can add the most value technologically in that transformation.
Right.
If you're not doing a lot of contract work because your company doesn't have a big deal of contracts, but you have a lot of other items that come up, you know, focus on how you can use technology to make that easier. You know, I can already see, you know, maybe in that point, and I've heard this from other people investigating this, maybe you adopt a CLM and like ContractPod.ai to really take on just general document management and tracking of record keeping, using it for those purposes to make sure that you're on top of all those things. But ultimately, you have to be involved. You have to be able to say, how does this work? Is this working the way I want? What's my goal? If your goal is to digitize your contract processes, digitize your corporate governance, all of that, how are you going to achieve that? Are you going to onboard it? Are you going to build workflows? Or are you going to sit around and go, well, I don't really care about this? Because if that's going to be your answer, then you're not going to achieve a successful digital transformation. So the key item is know what you want, or at least be able to express what you're trying to accomplish and be involved. And when the GC is involved and can explain what they're doing, then you really get into a system of we've got a plan for this product. We are able to say, this is what we want to accomplish. You're able to explain why, and then you're able to move forward. The other things I would say are the other GC task there, and team task even, is to involve other users.
Yes.
Sorry, Charles, go ahead.
No. I was just saying that's great. I like where you're going with this.
One thing that we really learned from our prior CLM was, and this was a mistake I made, and a mistake I'm fully willing to own up to, was I looked at it as a legal project, and everyone would have to follow my rules.
Right.
That may work if in some cases. I think if you are in a position where you can really say it's my way or the highway, great. The problem is not working as a team. And I keep going back to this idea of teams because, one thing that we found was very imperative was to go and say to our friends in finance, procurement, sales, IT, all of those groups, and say, where are your pain points? How would you like to work with us better? What can we integrate better? Where are you having trouble? And ultimately, we did surveys. We sat them down in meetings with our implementation partner at ContractPod AI, but other companies. We've also been able to go and say, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. How do you feel about it? And ultimately, because they had that integration, because they were involved, because they felt positive about the process, we've been able to turn people who used to be detractors on our process into champions who are really pushing to get more technology in, because what they're seeing is the more they work in the systems with us, the faster deals go. I'm proud to say that one of our biggest detractors, who used to be like, I don't want to use the system, why do I have to do this? When we got them involved early on in implementing the new system, they've become such a positive force to the point where when someone has a problem, we'll say, have you seen this problem? And if that one salesperson goes and says, I know exactly what they're experiencing, I'll call the other salesperson up and walk them through what they have to do.
That's fantastic. So you actually had advocates throughout the organization kind of working with you.
Exactly. And that's because we involved them. We are, I've taken a great step in saying, and, again, I know this isn't going to be every GC that's going to have, a background in IT and technology, but ultimately being able to say, look, give me 5 minutes. I'll be done in a few minutes. I want to watch what you're doing so that we know what's going on. And that just being able to say that and then get that done, or be able to get another member of the sales team to jump in and help, has been a tremendous change, a tremendous force for good here, and a real portion of the digital transformation. Because if you don't have that, if you try to move it all by yourself, whether it's a legal team, a finance team, procurement, or anybody, you're going to get pushback because people inherently don't want to change, but they also want to feel valued. So if you make them feel valued, if you make sure that they're part of that change, they will ultimately help you drive that change and be a supporter, be an advocate. And, ultimately, that one sales guy, we turned what was his first time, took months because he didn't want to do it. He refused to do things. Things kept getting messed up. Now we turned around the contract with him in 24 hours. That 24 hours on our paper with minimal red lines from the other side, because we made it so easy for them to work with us.
Nice.
That the goal, if I look at it that way, the goal of digital transformation is ease of use, is ease, expedience, and just making all the process a better, easier, faster, more functional process for everybody. Sorry, I could go on about this for hours in much greater detail, but I know we only have an hour for our chat, Charles.
So if I might just summarize that, I mean, two main key points that I kind of gathered from what you just said were, collaborate with the rest of the business, because that makes a big difference in terms of getting adoption. Because if they feel that they're early in that process, they're going to want to work with the legal team to actually make this happen. And the second thing is, frankly, which you started off on, was the point that you made about the GC really should be involved and kind of know some of the details and set that pace and kind of the vision, set that vision and say, here's what I want. And Jerry, that reminds me, I mean, so I know I'm going a little bit off script from what we chatted about before, but when I remember you told me a story about you chatting with another GC about whatever, that GC was having a lot of problems with their system, and they were kind of scratching their head saying, what's going on? How come it's not what I wanted, et cetera. And I remember you made a really good point there, and you picked up the phone and you chatted with this person and you said, well, you need to get involved. Did you want to just elaborate briefly on that one?
Yeah, and I think this goes for very techie GCs, not tech company GCs, but very techie GCs, but also non-tech GCs that have been, and CLOs. You know, I use GC as a catch-all for CLO, head of legal, SVP legal, whatever it is.
Yes.
But as the, I actually like the sound now of legal executive or legal leader as well.
Okay.
But you have to be a leader. But there's also this idea of servant leadership, that you have to pay attention to what other people need. As a good GC and as a servant leader, you need to understand what is going on. And if you're finding that the implementation or your platform or what you're doing isn't working the way you want it to work, the question you want to figure out is, what am I missing? Or what can I do to understand this? So with the GC, with that GC you mentioned, with that general counsel you mentioned, my question really was, hey, I understand you're having problems. I'm glad someone told you to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk. But my first question is how involved have you been? And that GC came back and said, well, I don't know much about it. I've really let my paralegal and contract manager take the lead. I said, and without being trying to be funny, I said, I think that's the problem.
Yes.
They may be very close to the contracts. They may have an idea of how they want to do it, but they're looking to you to come in and hold their hand at times to express what you want. If you want everybody to submit I'll put it this way, because this is my thing. I want our sales team to submit everything, to kick everything off in Salesforce, a system that they're familiar with.
Yes, right. Good idea.
For me, when I went back to this, when I said to this GC, I said, how do you want people to start working in the system? Well, I don't know. And then she said, I don't know. And I said, okay, so let's figure that out. Do you want people to submit a request to you to assign it out, or do you want them to submit it directly in and then a workflow picks up? Well, she goes, well, that sounds a lot easier. I said, okay. So now you're getting to the point where you're starting to figure out what you want. And that was just one question.
Yes.
And we spent about a half an hour, 45 minutes on the phone. And I basically walked her through this idea of how do you want people to interact on a very high level?
Yes.
And from there, she said, oh my God, I see what you're seeing. I see what you're saying. If I need to go and decide what I want, not just have it for my team, but also figure out how people want to work with it. And the key thing there was, and the end takeaway was, where do you want people to go? How do you want them to work with the system? How do you want them to really interact with the system? And ultimately, if you don't know what you want, it's very hard for a person, for any other user to tell you what you want.
Yes.
I'll personally say this. I want to have my salespeople start off in a system they're familiar with. If they do that, everything works really smoothly. If they start off in a system they're unfamiliar with, things get selected wrong. We have to go back. We may have to remove the contract and start over. So we pushed to have everything kick off in Salesforce. Once that's done, Salesforce pushes it to ContractPod AI. Contract Pod AI then alerts the legal team, and we begin working with the sales team on that contract. An attorney, internal attorney is assigned, or a contract manager, and then we move on from there. That works for me. That may work for a lot of other companies, but it may not. And so that's why the key thing is for the GC to get involved, to express how they want to work. And even if it's not your forte, you know, you've got to at least get yourself in that process. And I learned this years ago, setting up a contract management system for a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company, and the entire system, in my opinion, and I got it working, but the GC came in, said, "Thanks for making that work. You know, I wish someone had involved me earlier." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, it's not really what I want to work in."
Yes.
And I said, "Well," and you know, I was a much more junior attorney at that point, and I felt strange saying to this GC, "Well, sir, if that's not what you wanted, why did you tell them to go ahead with it?"
Yeah.
So that's really where I picked that up.
Yes.
You have to know, and look, again, not everyone's tech savvy. Not everyone is sitting there, you know, buying the latest phone, getting the latest computer, talking about registry editing and software and certain code snippets with their IT and developers. I get that. But at the very least, you know, you should sit down and say, what do I want this to do? How do I want it to work? Who has to be involved? And then go from there from that stance, you know, now you know what you want. Now you can at least go to the implementation team or whoever you're working with and express an idea of what you want to have happen and why.
Yeah, and that's very good advice. I mean, that at the end of the day, I think the legal team, the company, is really looking to the GC or the head of legal to basically kind of set the vision. So I think that's very, very sound advice you're providing. So that's great.
You have to be a visionary of what you want. And by the way, I get that. By the way, Charles, I get that some GCs come into an organization that's got a lot of stuff set up already, and they may have to learn what they like and don't like in that organization as on the fly. But that's your job. You're being brought in to be that person. You're being brought in to be the vision setter.
And it's not, you know, like you're not saying that a GC has to be involved in every little techie decision. I mean, if it's a minor product, who cares, whatever, that's fine, let somebody else deal with it. On the other hand, if it's a significant thing, which is, you know, changing the way people work, changing the results you're getting, actually really bringing, you know, potentially has tremendous impact for a company, then you're saying, no, this is important enough that, frankly, you've got to make some time, you've got to be the champion of this, and you've got to drive this and set the vision.
Right. I mean, ultimately, if you're either doing a digital transformation or you're not, and the point of the reason it's a transformation and not simply a minor step change is because it does transform the way your organization works. You are going to shift how you think about what you're doing. Your teams are going to shift how they think about it, and everybody's going to get used to a new manner of working.
Yeah. So let me shift into a slightly more tactically. Now, we are kind of at the end of the summer as we're recording this, and you know, you often do shake your head and think, where did the summer go? Oh my goodness. But at the same time, and we are right smack in the middle of the pandemic at the moment. Some good signs have been happening in different places in the world. Hopefully the vaccine comes through at some point in time. You know, the future is yet to be seen, I suppose. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are bracing for, you know, potentially another wave coming, maybe in September, October time frame. You know, who knows? But are you nervous about that? Like in terms of just the idea of about having your staff, I mean, some of your staff are trickling back in, some are still working it out. Are, you know, any concerns on that side, or are you saying, no, you know what, frankly, we've got this down, we've got this handled?
I think we're seeing a lot more folks having determined that they've got this down at this point, that they're comfortable doing it. Look, the health and safety of my team and our employees is paramount here.
Yes.
I don't want anybody to be feeling I don't want anybody to get sick. I don't want anybody to worry about, whether they have to choose between life or death in this case.
No, absolutely.
But ultimately, working from home is a lot easier. Working remote, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you wanted to, you could probably, Charles, you might like this, you could probably do your job from a treehouse in Costa Rica.
Sounds nice.
Sounds very nice. And that's been one of the key things I think we've learned from the pandemic. Yeah. What I don't want is for someone to feel that what I really want people to do is feel safe and comfortable in their working environment.
Yes.
And I think we're getting to a point where we really can feel comfortable where we work remotely. And part of this has been simply because we put the tools in place. And right now, I do think there's a good point. You're making a very good point. I think a lot of people are expecting a second wave. Yes. And, one key thing is if you weren't prepared for the first wave and you've spent these 5 months, I don't have a better word for this than the old-fashioned word lollygagging. Procrastinating over what you're going to do. Yeah. You're going to have real trouble. I want to be wrong here. I really want to be wrong. But if you haven't done these things to really get at least a remote, capable workplace, you're going to have real trouble going forward. And I think most companies have been able to do this. A lot of tech companies have gone to work from home for the next year and a half. So
yeah, that's true. I've seen a couple of announcements like that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I like being in the office. I get more done. Sometimes I brought my little tiny pet robot home for the first time when I came back to the office a few weeks ago. But all of this is stuff that, do I want to put anybody's health at risk? No. Do I want to put my health at risk? No. So you've got to set that up. And if you're not thinking about this now, if you weren't thinking about this before and you've only started thinking about it now, this is pretty much your chance to make that change, to make that transformation, and do it quickly. I'm going to plug your product a little, Charles. One thing that I love, if you don't mind, I'm going to plug this. One thing that I really enjoyed about ContractPod AI is that, I've spent a lot of time implementing it, but one of the things I discovered too was off the shelf, it works. Yes. It didn't need significant. If you're listening to this and you're wondering about ContractPod AI, and they're not paying me to say this, I'll say this right now. I'm saying this because it was this easy. I started working before in ContractPod AI. My team started working before implementation was even starting. So we were able to get that done and begin loading contracts in, tying things together, using the AI without any setup, which is a great sign that even if you're just approaching this now and you're looking for a CLM, that you can work right off the bat in the system with very little setup. So I think that's a great feature if you're trying to decide, can we do this quickly? Of course, it helps to do the implementation. It helps to work through the transformation with your team there, Charles. But ultimately, it's something that you can spin up and work on very quickly. And now I'll stop plugging the software again.
No, but I mean, it's a really good point that you make. I think in the market, I think a lot of people have taken a bit of an approach of hunker down and wait this out. And the concern is that at the beginning, I think we all thought, okay, maybe this will last a month or two and then it'll pass and it'll be over. But this is taking a lot longer than we all expected. And it could take a lot longer yet, which basically means if you're hunkering down and waiting, you could be waiting for a long time, which means that your legal team isn't going to be advancing where it needs to be advancing. And frankly, that means that you could be falling behind on things. When the CEO calls you up and says, hey, how many of our contracts have this particular clause that's causing us pain? It's funny because I was chatting with another another company out in Asia, and he was saying, most of his colleagues basically shrug and say, I have no idea, because all the contracts are sitting at the office or they're on drives that I can't access or things like that, which is crazy. Now, The neat thing, though, is actually when, a couple of months ago, in fact, we started thinking about exactly that. And thanks for actually mentioning it, because it's, talk to your vendors, whether it's us, ContractPod, or another vendor. Ask them, if you are in that process of thinking about one of these systems, should I wait it out? Or is there a quick way to kind of get me up and operating as fast as possible? Maybe it's not the entire suite of all the different things or all of my contracts, all 10, 20, 30,000 in there, but at the very least, is there a way for me to get up and operating really fast? And fortunately for us, we actually developed a method that can get you up there in about 10 days. And again, it's not everything, et cetera, but at least it gets you going, which is really, really important, specifically at a time like this. So thank you for that. So let me ask you another question, though, since you were talking about the product. Is there any feature that came out as one of the favorites amongst your team or even yourself?
That's a great question. And so I had very specific requests. One thing that we were very bad at, and I'm happy to point this out because I think a lot of legal teams are bad at this, is abstracting and pulling information into a usable format that doesn't require you to dive through, look, if you're on our paper, our contract is short, it covers what we do, it's very straightforward. I tried to be very fair. I'm happy to say that, and I'm always looking to improve our paper as things change, as we get feedback from our customers. I've moved to, when I first started, I was very, very aggressive, and because that was what I was trained to do. But you slowly learn, or very quickly learn, that you can't take a hardline position on everything. So and I'm probably getting off the topic here, but and so feel free to tell me to go back to the question if you want. But
it's good. I like off-roading.
No, so but one of the key things that we were looking for, and one of the key things that we found was we were not abstracting well. We weren't able to generate, with the system we had in place, we could capture metadata, but it wasn't useful. What we were capturing wasn't helpful. We had to search everything. So if it was our paper, great. It was really easy to spot a difference. But if you have, some of our customers are very, very regulated industry customers. And there you have contracts that can be 50, 100. We have a 600-page contract with one customer.
600 pages, it's amazing.
And I would say, again, being kind of funny, I would say almost 90% of that contract is irrelevant to us. It covers things like, how do you check into a secured facility if you are wearing a bunny suit, basically. And but we had to keep it in because they don't let you cut it out. They're like, it doesn't apply. We know it doesn't apply, but those 30 pages about safety and security at this level 4 virus, speaking of viruses, at this level 4 testing facility, you must keep it in there in case you ever go in. And my actual response was, we're selling you a SaaS product. Do we really need this? Ultimately, abstracting takes a lot of time. It's very difficult for folks. It can, and especially if you're on a small team, it takes a long time. So being able to click a button and have ContractPod AI's AI pull that information out easily without needing to have a paralegal or a contract manager or an attorney spend a day or 2 days or 4 days going through it to pull out that information is a tremendous time saver. Another thing that I had at a prior company and really missed was the family tree that ContractPod AI provides in this. And believe it or not, you wouldn't think that this is a key feature, and maybe others it may not be. But for me, I wanted to be able to look at my contracts in that family tree, where I could go and say, okay, here's the great grandparent of the contract. That's the NDA. Here's the grandparent. Here's the master. Here's each work order or each license order. Here are the amendments. here and being able to see in that tree and how they connect has made it so useful when if I can't find something because maybe the search term isn't showing up, or someone put it in, the company name changed and they put it in the Salesforce, the salesperson put it in the Salesforce under the new company name. Now I can find it, I can get it, and I can, I can find it, I can get it, and I can see the history of what's going on.
Yes.
But those were two basic things. And then I talk about this all the time, and I think another key item, and again, maybe not for others, but definitely for me and for my team, was moving from what I call document-based contract management to contract or contract-based contract management.
Yes.
For some, if you're document-based, every document is a new thing. I don't feel, and I compare document-based systems to basically keeping it in an Excel file and having to read through it every time, or SharePoint or something like that. SharePoint has its place, but if your contract management system, and again, for me, this is important, but I want to see my contracts with their key information. I want to know, as each line in my CLM should be a record. Each idea should be that one contract, pull that information together, see the family, see the terms, all that. If I have to go through it in a document-based system where, some people can upload everything to a folder, there's nothing, we ended up with one folder that had, even though the system did versioning, had 55 different versions of the contract in it. I'm probably exaggerating, but for the purposes of this, okay, let's say there were 15 different versions. Even though they could do versioning, the people were dropping, sales material, marketing material, all of this was really in the file, and ultimately you couldn't find anything. So for me, that move was transforming from document-based and transitioning to contract-based, really a database that was searchable, that was easy to use, and that you could narrow it down by just the customer easily. In our old system, and one thing that we would find would be, okay, we searched for the word, Ishkabibble. I'm going to make up a customer. The Ishkabibble company. Anything that ever had Ishkabibble in it would show up in a search.
Yes.
And now because we've moved to this searchable, contract-based, really contract-based contract management system rather than document-based, I can go and just say, show me only contracts between us and Ishkabibble company. And boom, I see 4 contracts. I see their family. I see their termination dates. I see the key information I need. And if I really need to go into it, guess what? Contract Pod AI has done OCR. It's pulled out the terms. I'm able to go in easily and do it.
Third party.
Look, some features are your basic table stakes. Every contract management system this day should be doing OCR. Every contract management system should give you the ability to assign metadata. But not everybody is doing it in a way that works for real human beings to actually interact with. A lot of them end up being, hundreds of man hours of implementation costs, or they end up being, really just additional file storage or something along those lines. I can't see how those end up. One is really for a company that can afford to spend $30 million implementing a system. Good for you. That's great. If you want to give me that much money, we can do that. But ultimately, it should be something that works out of the box, can be implemented and be customized to your needs. But should have those base, for me at least, the AI, being able to pull out the term, being able to do and I'm really talking because this is something I'm very excited about. And I know it shows up in my face, I smile and cheerfully about contract management.
Yeah.
which may mean I'm actually insane. But I really
No,
do
I think
think,
you've done a lot of research on this, which is great, and you've seen a lot of systems out there, which again gives, I think, a lot of the people who might view this afterwards, that gives them a good bearing to say, hey, these are some of the things you got to think about. And by the way, Jerry, I really liked what you said about the on the AI side. I mean, out of the box, absolutely, that's one of the things you should look for. Look for the implementation. Does that actually happen? Is it automatic, or do I have to go to an SI, et cetera? Those are things that usually most people, certainly most GCs, aren't really thinking about actively until they realize at the end, saying, oh, did you just sell me a piece of software, but you didn't actually sell me the implementation or getting up and running? I mean, is that my job? Like, geez, I got a lot of other things to do. Now, the other thing I really like that you kind of pointed out was the AI part. So many people are very, AI kind of almost inspires a bit of fear in them, thinking that, oh my gosh, jobs are going to be lost or something. But your approach was to say, hey, how can we use the AI and look at all these extra capabilities that it really brings to the table, that capability of extraction, the summarization, things like that, which is absolutely brilliant. And that's what you want, specifically on that 600-page document, which is insane. To try to just look through for whatever clause you were searching for. So brilliant, excellent.
I do have the benefit of being the general counsel of an AI company. So
yes.
I do approach it differently.
Yeah.
We really focus on making it so that humans can work faster with AI.
Yes.
We don't want people to be scared of cognitive computing. We don't want people to be worried about this. We just need to get this. People have to understand that there will be a change, but we're going to figure out a way to work with it. Yes. There are many things. The EU has put, European Union, the US, everybody's thinking about how AI is going to change the world in the next 5, 10, 20 years. Because computers will do some things that humans feel are menial tasks that they don't want to do.
Well, you know what? The human working with the AI, that's probably the best combination, and that's how you guys are using it today, which is brilliant.
Absolutely. Sorry,
Jerry, one last question, because I know I've taken a lot of your time already, which is just, any last words of advice to the GC in terms of going through this journey, or just kind of taking on technology, or anything along those lines?
Sure. I think the key thing is, GCs, don't be afraid of technology. Don't be afraid to take the lead, but do it with a partner, and make sure that you're working with people who can adequately explain what's going on. Or if you don't know, and if you are troubled, there are teams out there that are working, there are groups out there that are trying to educate. And part of it may be for GCs, for other GCs, for other legal executives and leaders, become aware of what's going on in the market. 15 years ago, when I started working, e-discovery was the hottest thing in the world. And now it's routine. You can't go through a case without doing e-discovery. Every little claim involves some level of electronic document discovery, electronic discovery. Everything happens that way. This is now coming in, and everybody is going, how do we do this better? How do we manage legal teams better? How do we increase efficiency, decrease cost, and make this better? So the key thing I would say is, educate yourself on the technology. Learn what's going on. Develop a familiarity with the products that are out there. And even if you don't have time, attend a class, take a take a legal education course on it, so that you can at least feel more comfortable with what's going on. And then don't be afraid to say, I need help. I feel like a lot of lawyers are always afraid to admit that they need to go get help from somewhere, because we're supposed to be experts on everything. We're supposed to be able to know how this works and that works, and be able to give an opinion in just a few minutes. You can't do this. I'm sorry. You can't do that. But that's the key thing, is to get involved, learn about it, and ultimately, step outside your comfort zone to achieve a transformation that ultimately and hopefully benefits your team, benefits you, and benefits if you're an outside counsel, benefits your clients, If you're inside counsel, benefits your company, your members of your leadership team, and ultimately, hopefully, I focus a lot on this. I didn't get to mention it, but ultimately protects revenue and drives growth.
Yes.
And that should be, if you want to think about two things you need, it's protect your revenue, drive growth, keep people happy.
Yes. Nice. Excellent. Good. And we'll end on that note. Jerry, thank you so much for chatting with me and with the audience as well. This was a really, really productive conversation. Love your input, all the different things that you've experienced with your team as well. Heck, going through this crisis, the pandemic that we've been going through, how you've kind of weathered the storm, how your team has, and I think you've done a very, very good job. And again, some excellent nuggets in there. So again, thank you for your time and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Charles. It's been a pleasure.